my bedroom, try to keep it dark.
Hmm.
I tape my mouth at
You
night, so I'm
do?
breathing
No
through my.
way.
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Of course.
Yeah,
All
it's a big
right.
deal. Yeah. I mean, ideally, I would grow up in a way that I wouldn't breathe through my mouth while I sleep.
Hmm.
But if you wake up in the morning, your mouth is dry, it would behoove you to do something about that. I raised the back of my bed up 4 or 5 inches. So my bed's actually tilted at like 15 or 20-degree angle.
Welcome to another show of the Safina podcast. I am your host, Sebastian ENGSTROM, and today, Aaron Alexander joins me. He is the host of the Align podcast. He is the author of the just released extended revamped version of the Align method. So we talk about biohacking, we talk about high performance, we talk about sleep, sitting, all kinds of stuff that you didn't expect normally from a health podcast. This is what he's all about. This is what the book is about. And that's why I am stoked to share this with you. Because I normally, when I see a health book, I'm like, heard it, seen it, read about it. But he brings aspects that I did not expect out there in this world. Like the breathing is a big part. Like I started implementing nose breathing now working out. Maybe I'll tape my mouth. Let's see if I do that when sleeping. So enjoy this podcast. If you like it, please do the good deed. Favor of the day, hit 5 stars on Apple. That means the world, helps us spread the message to more people. It takes you 5 seconds. Hit a review. Even if you're on, let's say, Spotify, Google, another platform, hit subscribe, like. I mean, it means the world because this helps us spread the message, helps keep the podcast alive. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy this episode with Aaron Alexander. Aaron, amazing to have you here. Just finished your book and it couldn't be more suiting that you're sitting on your floor. You have some interesting things in your background. And that's, I mean, let's just start off with sitting on the floor. Like how often do you do that? And how was it acclimating to it?
Well, uh, spending time on the ground is such a common thing. It's almost strange to that it is a novel conversation. It's like, it's like drinking clean water. Like how long have you
Yeah.
been drinking water without a bunch of pollutants in it? Like, tell me about that. Like, well, been trying to do it, since I was a baby.
Yeah.
Ideally, I was indoctrinated into a world with parents that have healthy hips and healthy knees and healthy ankles and healthy pelvic floor muscles and are just well circulated bags of water.
Yeah.
Humans are like bags upon bags upon bags of hopefully well circulated water, and disease is a product of adhesion and dehydration and agglomeration and sticking, binding of ourselves. Once we get sticky, our connective tissues start to stick upon themselves. That can create a backup and create a dam. And when we have dammed up fluids in the body, that can lead to disease. And the process of getting up and down off of the ground is a really simple, like borderline effortless way to become a more well circulated human being. And just naturally throughout the day, you're opening up range of motion through the toe hinge and the ankle joint and the knees and the hips and all the major joints in the body. And that's any culture that you go to that has not been like infected, I think you could say, or maybe just affected by a more institutionalized lifestyle. Not to say that it's a bad thing to grow up in a place where you're taught to sit in place. Typically, you don't get any education around mechanics of how to effectively sit in a way that does align and balance your spine and your central nervous system. That's your spine, your spinal cord. And you're kind of just slouching over, and then you're shortening your vision to stare into a screen, or maybe you're inside of a building where the next wall is maybe 10 to 15 feet away. So now you're shortening those muscles and around your eyes, ciliary muscles. And so that body, it literally starts to contract at a physical, visual level. And then the correlates of that, of the way that person feels, they start to feel maybe like a little bit bound up. They don't necessarily know exactly why. Before that happens, you are going to be getting up and down off the ground regularly. You'll be reaching up over your head regularly. You're going to be walking, it's just going to be like a part of your daily life. You ideally be breathing through your nose, doing all these things that we outlined in the alignment method book. That's just the being down on the ground. That's just a natural part of being a human being. If you go to cultures in Northern Africa or Eastern Mediterranean or Southeast Asia, these places have significantly less incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips and the knees, less pelvic floor issues, and they just kept doing that. They kept drinking water without pollutants in it, essentially. And it's not a weird, novel, impressive thing. It's just like, oh yeah, that's just what we do. So I started getting back into that, like making that be a regular part of my life, probably around like age, I don't know, 22 or something like that.
Oh, really?
Moved to Hawaii moved to Hawaii when I was 18, and got into jujitsu, and like yoga, surfing, so all that stuff, you're up and down off the ground all day. So that's the simple practices like that, that just naturally, organically, you're gonna be getting up and down off the ground, if you're a dancer, or any of those things. And then your body typically is quite supple and works pretty well. And then it's like, okay, how do we start to integrate that into maybe, the way that I eat, or the way that I work on the computer, or the way that I, just hang out at the house. It's really, it's so simple. I feel almost like asinine even talking about it. But then along with that, it's like the, fall risk is the number one leading cause of elderly needing assisted living, so that's like billions of dollars invested in healthcare for elderly, over time. And just the sovereignty of, feeling like, oh yeah, like I feel sovereign in my body. I don't feel like I'm dependent on having a red button or having, need a phone nearby so I can call somebody, because my body just like, there's certain ranges of motion that it just fails. I don't have access to anymore. And pelvic floor dysfunction and just all of the itis that develops in our joints from a lack of full functional range of motion. That simple movement patterns, such as effectively getting up and down off the ground. So there's a conversation around how do you do that effectively. It literally just stops it. It's just done. So it's like this like seemingly asinine thing to be talking about has, massive implications if you allow it to play out. So most things that matter, I think, are that way. It's like almost like, really? We're talking about breathing? Are we talking about spending time getting up and down off the ground regularly? Are we talking about walking? Like, really? Isn't there some complex acronyms or, something we could be talking about, or some supplement that we could inject into our ass? It's like, no, just get up and down off the ground, get sunlight, drink reasonably decent water, have decent relationships, have some level of purpose in your life. Walk. It's crazy.
Yeah. So tying that back into office culture, which is where I really started standing every single day. And I'm at a standing desk right now. I'm about to implement more of the sitting. And I think, you've seen a boom with that, with more modern workplaces. Maybe it's coming in that you might be sitting on the ground more. So what's your, how do you do that personally? Do you stand at all? And how do you implement that? I personally find a surge of energy and clarity and focus, and I find myself relaxing more and wanting to switch positions and having a harder time focusing. But it could be I'm not used to being on the ground.
Oh, I just feel incredibly uncomfortable hunching over like an asshole in a chair all day.
Right.
I just feel like a physical slob. Like I feel like my body is just like, ugh.
Right. So the standing part.
It's fine. The standing part.
Yeah.
Like a standing desk.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh, they're fine. They're and sitting on a chair is not bad. There's nothing wrong with sitting on a chair. Sitting on a chair is great. It's like a chair is a tool. It's how do you effectively be on that chair, and how do you effectively create oscillations or getting outside of just the rut of being in the same position over and over again. So you can effectively be on a chair. If you're going to be on a chair for a while, it'd be important to maybe get some compression socks. Could be a helpful thing. It'd be important to like go through different ranges of motion while you're on the chair, maybe let go of using a backrest all the time. Make sure your hips are up above the height of your knees. Position that chair or whatever your work environment is near a window so you can relax and open up the visual muscles, go in and out between panoramic vision and myopic, like closed in focused vision on a screen. Standing desks, so there's no villains. It's just, what do you want? Like, that's the thing, is first defining, okay, what is it that you want from yourself and your body? And, how do you want to feel when you're 50, 70, 90, 100, whatever, and now tomorrow morning, and then from there, reverse engineering that felt sensation that you choose. Now we start to reverse engineer it. Okay, what are the decisions that we make on a momentary basis to cultivate that? So sitting is fine. Just define what you want, and then we can, go from there. But standing desks, they're fine too. Standing is another weird position to be in for a really long time. So if you stand for an excessive amount of time, it's the same conversation. Blood's going to be pulling up in your lower limbs, so you're going to start to develop like that, just this fluid buildup, lymph, and it's like cankles and all that. Like, standing in place is stressful on the body, so if you have any type of impingement in your lower back, you're probably going to be standing excessive extension for a long time. So standing, the way to do that would be, get yourself a little stool beside, so you're kind of essentially mimicking, like, I'm on a little standing hike.
Sure.
So I raise my foot up, relax for a second, decompress the spine, allow a little bit of, like, just a little moment for decompression, and then alternate sides, going through that range of motion throughout the day. You can put some stuff on the ground, like, as we're doing this, I have like balls and random stuff around here. So I'll be kind of self-soothing, and doing a little myofascial release, and rolling out my joints and my connective tissue. You want to keep the pool flowing, right? Remember, so you're these bags and bags and bags of water, right? And so each muscle, we define them as being, these terms, bicep brachialis or vastus lateralis or whatever. Your body has no idea what you're talking about. Your body's one interconnected unit. It's an integrated form, and each of those spaces, that we call muscle bellies, they're bound by muscular septa, and then within that, there's a whole bunch of sliding surfaces that allow your body to move fluidly through space. And when you start to get gunked up in one specific position, especially if it's going to be like a position that wouldn't bear load well, you call it like a dysfunctional position. And you're practicing, you're rehearsing that position over and over and over again for hours and hours and hours and months and years and decades. Like, what would you expect to happen other than having some type of, one, your nervous system's going to begin to not trust you so much because it doesn't want to blow out some joint, so it'll start to shut down your potential access to power, because throughout the day you kind of have like a crimp in your main central channel, your spinal cord. So standing desk, within that, it's just making sure that you're maintaining movement as you're in that position. Same concepts. Make sure your eyes are able to relax, and understanding like the art of standing. Tadasana is a fancy term for it. Means mountain pose in yoga. And I mean, you could write a book about Tadasana position. So standing isn't just, it's not just like standing isn't just standing, same way walking isn't just walking, or sitting isn't just sitting. There's art and science in the way that you do those things as well. But I'm just rambling on, I apologize, but I would take standing over sitting on a chair, and then I would take sitting on the ground, with a floor cushion and like make it comfortable and nice and all that stuff, over both of them, like by far. Like there's really no contest.
So why we're going into this, because we spend so much time working, literally. So that's why I wanted to start off with that. It might be a bit boring. It's like, wait, what the hell are we doing? Talking about this topic, going right off the bat. That stood out to me almost the most, because I feel versed in many of the other topics biohacking wise, but sitting and also the breathing part is one that really stood out, the nasal breathing. And especially, and why I'm talking about these is like you said in the beginning, if you implement these to just a gradual level, you start seeing significant changes in your life. And it doesn't take that much to feel well. And all of a sudden, you don't need whatever your pills or your phone that much, whatever. There are gradual things that you can start building up when you become present of what you're doing and how you're doing them. And one of the big things for me, being very stressed and priding myself on being a high performer, is constantly going into shallow breathing up in my chest, not breathing with my nose, and that leading to all kinds of symptoms, anxiousness, even IBS to a degree, and all these other things. I'm like, how do I make this better? So what I found was Wim Hof breathing like 5 years ago. And I did that religiously every work day for 5 years in a row. And eventually it started getting me into a fight or flight response. It was incredible at first. Like, I saw things, there were visions, there are all these different feline animals connecting with that. It's been more of a spiritual animal to me since then. It's really connecting to that silent masculine part that is powerful and can be aggressive, but I've been very kind, you can say, and people pleasing, but very connecting to that strong, forceful feline energy. So in that way, it was very powerful, but it led me into a fight or flight response eventually. And then I got it into different types of breathing. Meditation has been a path the entire way. What you're talking about is not just something I can connect with. I do breathing, what we did here in the beginning, breathe in and out 10 times, say I love myself and I forgive myself almost every hour on the hour during the workday. But this is a game changer for me. The nasal breathing. And when you saying that, especially when you reference the Australian rugby team taping their mouths, I'm like, okay, this is hardcore shit. Do you mind going into a little bit more of that? I just listened to your podcast too with what's his name again?
Patrick McEwen.
Yes, indeed. Freaking brilliant guy. How would you summarize your thoughts on breathing?
Well, so first, I mean, there's a bunch of things there. One, I think the three main channels of points. One, breathing being outside of just the way that the obvious way that you're breathing, through your nose or through your mouth, and, diaphragmatically, engaging diaphragm to pull the lungs open, to, pull air into your lungs, and then, circulating through your body. That part is like the kind of the obvious idea of breathing, but then thinking of cellular respiration, and so allowing your whole entire body to breathe, through allowing it to move, so, and allowing it to start to open up some of those, like we're talking about, like the adhesed, dehydrated, bound up spaces. Your cells need to respirate, need to breathe, need to circulate outside of just your lungs being filled up with air. So I think broadening the conversation of what is breath to not just inhale, exhale, mouth or nose, lungs, and making that kind of be the operation, but really thinking like, as you're taking a walk, you're allowing your cells to respirate. If you are standing and you're bringing one foot up, another foot up, and your foot up, and or if you're sitting in a chair and you're kind of twisting yourself out, and you're kind of reaching to the back of the chair, one of those guys. All of those positions are supportive for allowing you to respirate at a cellular level. And then the other thing that would, in relation to what you're saying, and then we'll get into just like the breathing, the obvious breathing part, but what you're saying is the concept or story or identity of being a high performer. I think that in and of itself, there can be a lot of contraction in there, and so if a person's kind of bound up in a story of contraction, or approval, so that's like a really common thing, and it's become popularized, to like, oh, I want to be like, I think I've probably been on podcasts called like the High Performer Podcast, or whatever, things of that sort. And just even that idea, it's like the concept of performing, like if that's like what a person identifies with, that in and of itself goes, it almost creates a separation with yourself, so as opposed to just like a beer. I've found a way to almost, it seems effortless in the way that the story of bees.
Mm-hmm.
And one, quantitatively, you can look at that and you say, wow, like, man, they won the gold medal, or wow, they did the 1080 flip in the half pipe, or
Mm-hmm.
wow. But in that time frame of a person actually executing whatever things that would be deemed to be performance, the only way to arrive at that place of what would be seemed almost like maybe flow state, or almost seem like, wow, it's like a miracle that person can perform in that way,
Mm-hmm.
is to let go of the concept of performance. So it's a kind of an interesting thing to have that be like our like mantra, our motto or identity structure for ourselves. Like, I'm a performer, because there's always going to be within that. It's almost like the performance is some level of mask, or maybe it could be perhaps like a lack of acceptance of self, like a deeper self. Like, what if I'm a loser? As long as I'm attached to the concept of being a winner, then I'm in a highly vulnerable state.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you're attached to something happening to you that feels good, you're like, oh wow, ooh, oh. You get your validation points, you get your little neurochemical hits, or whatever it may be. You temporarily feel good.
Sure.
As long as you're in that place, then inevitably the other side of that is going to come. So I think that's an interesting construct in and of itself, just to be in a place of like, oh, I'm a high performer. So I wonder for you, like, where do you feel like you got the identity of being a high performer?
Yeah, it elevated me to, okay, so I got a refresh when I moved to the United States, and I now find myself, okay, this is a blank slate. I can start from scratch. And what do I get attention from? Where do I get this endorphin hits for me doing something that people show like, oh, whoa, what is that guy doing? So it was really the attention, which is a synonym for love. And I thought that, me being in that state, I felt more purpose. Like, I felt like I was doing something with my life. I didn't feel before. I'm like, kind of being unambitious teenager, and all of a sudden I got this hit of I'm verified for being someone or something and making a difference. And then I took it to the extreme. And I'm curious too, this will lead into a question back. You hear this with, for example, Beyonce. She had an alter ego. I can't remember what she called herself, but now she merged that, like she was Sasha, whatever she called herself on stage, this wild, fierce Amazon woman who was just out there super confident. And then she was more laid back, calm, thoughtful off the stage, and now she merged them, she said. And I heard several years back there was one guy specifically focused on it is essential to have these alter egos that you create these masks. So I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here, and that you step into these roles because they will elevate some part of you that you would not be able to access in another way. You can merge them.
So they're tools. Yeah. But anytime you say something like, I am a high performer, if that's ultimately what you entirely identify with, then that in and of itself, there's going to be a deeply held contraction and awaiting for approval, because who exactly are you performing for?
Right.
So
My
if
father
that's
was for me. Yeah.
I mean, that'd be very, very common. And so that's the thing. And then that comes into the breathing conversation. If there is a deeply held resistance or contraction, or, seeking of approval, bated breath, waiting for someone to say that you're a good boy in whatever way that they say that, then that will be a deeply, perhaps subconscious, perhaps conscious, there's certainly levels of subconscious, even in the most like conscious fucking woke person, like they're the more conscious and woke they are, probably the deeper layers of twists and turns and impingements and contractions and maybe self-denial there typically are going to be. Because to really be in a place of like effortless action, wu-wei or whatever, you're not going to identify as being a really swell guy.
Mm.
You're not going to identify as being a really amazing performer. You're going to just allow the performance to naturally manifest itself. And then when people applaud, you say, oh, cool. Like, how lovely, like I received this. This is great, but I received this through you. This isn't about me. It's not 1,000 people saying, we accept you. We love you. We're like, oh God, I'm accepted. I love. It's like, like I accept you. I love you. And so if you can be in that kind of more circular place and not holding on to any of the baggage of people's applause or verification or validations or any of that, that's like really being in a like a truer expression of self. But if you're identifying with one specific category, like I am a high performer because it feels good, you're trying that on ultimately is all you're doing. And maybe you try that on for a month, a year, maybe 10 years, maybe until you die, but you're trying that on. And then behind that, it's like, okay, cool, I can put that down and say, oh, I'm also I'm a father, or I'm a crazy person, I'm a lunatic, I'm a loser, I'm all of the I'm all of the things. I'm compassionate, I'm caring, I'm a winner, like I'm all of it. Like, oh, I'm gonna try that one on. And then you can flip through those, and each of those becomes a little bit less sticky because you can acknowledge them for being like you mentioned, like the masks that they are. And then within that journey, that trickles back into the way that a person comes into like acceptance of self, because now I accept all the different layers. I don't just accept one specific layer. And then that allows your autonomic nervous system and your respiratory system, cardiovascular system, to be able to relax, because it's in a place of acceptance of itself and acceptance of the world and acceptance of that terrible thing that happened. Because ultimately you're not bound to one specific story of how life is supposed to be or who you're supposed to be, which whoever the fuck made that story, who knows? But you're open to the whole thing. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're starting to breathe.
So where are you at in your journey right now yourself? And what are the layers that are presenting themselves in your life?
Well, I think it depends. It depends who I'm with. If I'm in a space where people are very like spiritual, kind of vibe. There's a lot of that in Austin, Texas, a lot of that in LA, where I came from before that. My tendency is to kind of go into like devil's advocate direction. So when someone's really very much one thing, like you started this conversation kind of getting into like self-forgiveness and getting into self-love and all of these things. When I hear a lot of that, I'm kind of like, well, also fuck all that, and just like let's because you can keep digging into your own layers of trauma until the proverbial cows come home. Like it never stops. You just keep digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging and digging. And if I'm around someone, so then that part of me will come out and I'll be like, oh, let's just party. Like I don't even drink, but like, let's drink, let's get drunk. We should get in a fist fight. Like we should go that direction. It's too soft.
So how do they react when when you take their approach?
I think it's typically good.
Okay.
I mean, I think naturally people want to be in a balanced place, and typically when someone is very much in that like can feel kind of like, I think sometimes there can be a little bit of like a victimhoodness in that spaces where people are like really going into doing the work and my trauma and this and that, and it's kind of like and then there can be kind of like a front of vulnerability, because vulnerability is like I've learned that the world applauds me when I appear to be vulnerable. And so then I'm leading with the story of what I deem to be vulnerability, when even still it's still a coat, and so I think that people, when they're in those places, and then there's the other side too, there's being big muscle ego machismo guy, there's big money Rolex guy, there's all those things. But I think when we get outside of that, it's like, oh well, both of those are stories. The idea that I'm a mother, or the idea that I'm a victim, or the idea that I'm a winner, that I'm the elite, I'm the 0.01% of the 1%, like all of these different ideas they're just stories. And I think people like to have those stories kind of pulled away. Like it feels almost good in a way, like, oh yeah, and it's no one person's role or responsibility, and sometimes it can be downright rude, and it might be your own projection of your own bullshit, and the other person could just be in their moment, and there's no inauthenticity in it at all, and you're projecting your own shit into that, and you're actually the one that's at fault. But when there is any level of kind of like game, I think people kind of, it can feel scary and uncomfortable, but also kind of good for the game to be transitioned. Especially when a person is I think in like the, woe is me type place, and kind of getting into a switching gears into, yes, and like, let's party, we can go that direction too.
So when you take this a step further, then, so beyond being the devil's advocate, who else is Aaron outside of that?
Well, where Aaron is in the like the, I think I'm getting to know myself. Like I feel like moments of, moments in, say using meditation, or maybe certain like breathwork things, or maybe just like, general moments of bliss of sorts, or psychedelic times, or things of the sort, where there's like another gear, of feeling like just very safe, and like a sensation of like being connected to everything, and that feels very true. Like it feels very like, like that's like, that feels very like deeply true beyond words. And then there's the coming back into like the dualistic part, and the identity, and like the story and personality, and hopes and desires and fears, and all of that. And I'm just in process of finding deeper peace in that gear, and not dropping, I don't like the concept of dropping really, but creating more balanced, accepting relationship with some of like the sensations of contraction, that I've picked up along the way. Yeah, so I mean, Aaron is in process, I guess.
So how do you, and you can say this word is overused at times, but integrate that when you have these deep experiences and you're referencing to having a balance, being and making things happen in this world? How do you merge the two? And how do you, I mean, you're doing things in this world. You're talking to significant people. You released a significant book. How do you merge the two into not just going too far into one side? And have you, even if you had gone into one side too much, please speak to it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I probably go definitely too much into the separation side, for sure. I think it's important to look at, to not judge any one. I mean, probably I'd say if people are listening to this or listening to you, might I don't know, about what you do outside of this, but my sense that they're probably have had like unicity in quotation type experiences, I imagine, if they've arrived here.
Right.
And there can become like an attachment to that, and then like the story of like being a spiritual person. And Ram Dass has a bit where he talks about needing to you've been dropped into the human suit, human incarnation, like take the human curriculum, asshole. Like, what are you doing? Why are you trying to be so fucking spiritual? And so I think that there's value in everything. There's value in all of it. So that unicity part, just to kind of break it down a little bit more binary, say like unicity, duality. I think it's like looking at perceiving that to be kind of like respiration. You inhale, that activates more of that sympathetic, get her done side of the nervous system. You exhale, activates more of that parasympathetic, rest, relax, chill the freak out side of the nervous system. So I think that it's the healthiest mind body would be the body that oscillates freely in and out of unicity and duality and has certain anchor points throughout the day. So maybe you meditate, or maybe you go for a run, maybe you go for a swim, maybe you go for a surf, maybe you have sex, maybe you do some breath work, like whatever your thing is. Maybe you just chill, maybe you just pay attention, like maybe you wash dishes and you just notice the weight in your feet, you notice the temperature in your skin, you notice like ambient noises or sounds in your environment, and you just have that moment of like, checking it, and that starts to make you feel maybe a little bit more rested, or make you feel a little bit more creative, or puts you more into that awareness of like, oh yeah, like surely everything is going to be all right, because like I can't fail. This is just a novel that's playing out. And whatever happens, it truly is perfect. Like I can absolutely identify like 100%, like, yeah, like this is, because I'm not ultimately maybe afraid of death, because death also is a story. So if I'm concerned about losing this body, or losing these friends, or losing these, whatever, my car, whatever stuff that I've accrued, I'm not worried. I'm not attached. There's no stickiness around any of that. I could transition out of this thing, and it would be, there wouldn't be like a contraction around that. Having some moment where you can kind of start to dip into that space, and then gather the lessons that you get from that into a conversation with another person, where we're truly are, two separate minds kind of ping pong back and forth with each other, or integrating that into work with a book, or integrating that work into whatever your work is or your life is. Starting to reconstruct your personality with that awareness that, the truth that you get maybe from whatever your spiritual, in quotations, practices, and then, integrating that into your separate personality, and then you get personality guy for a while, and you might notice, oh, now I feel triggered by this thing. This makes me pissed off. Now I feel really horny. Now I feel really greedy. Now I feel, fuck that guy. He's an asshole, oh, you don't love me, I don't love you, or like whatever, whatever your things are. And because you have the momentum from being in that spiritual practice place, you can kind of start to, the same way that you're not identifying with any of the other stuff we were talking about in the spiritual realm. You can say, oh, okay, interesting. Like I get this reaction in my stomach every time I, whatever, this person calls, or something happens, this person cuts me off in traffic, or whatever. And I can say, there's that thing. Great. Love it. Accept it. It's fantastic. See what the deeper lessons are within that, as opposed to just trying to push it off to the side. Say, like, don't like that. Like, cut it out, drop it, say like, oh no, like invite it. Say, wow, why do I have this IBS right now? Why do I feel inflamed right now? Why do I have back pain every time, I go to my office, and I sit in that chair? Is it just the chair, or is there some other kind of thing happening here? So starting to actually enjoy those moments of tension, and, inviting them in to see what they're actually suggesting. I think that opens up another level of information and availability for growth, because now, as opposed to these things just being weights, these reoccurring kind of like goblins underneath your bed that you're trying to like keep pushing underneath, it allows you to actually, address those things. And then on the other side of that is probably is more cycles of that. You just keep on going through cycles of that.
Yeah. So what does a day look like? Because you're going into some deep concepts. What does a day look like for you, a regular day? Because there are many practices and there are many concepts that you've spoken about. And there's so many different topics that we can't even discuss during this podcast. It's in the book. But what does a regular day for you look like, so you can incorporate what you're speaking to?
Yeah. Well, try to pay attention to maintaining some level of consistency around sleep. Sleep's a big thing. My bedroom, try to keep it dark. I tape my mouth at night.
You do? No way.
Yeah, okay.
Of course.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah. I mean, ideally I would grow up in a way that I wouldn't breathe through my mouth while I sleep. But if you wake up in the morning, your mouth is dry, it would behoove you to do something about that. Yeah. So taping your mouth is a really easy solution. Just get some of that, like the surgical, whatever tape you get, like a Rite Aid or CVS or something. And it's kind of like water resistant. And so tape the mouth while I'm sleeping. And there's, a long list of reasons of why that's supportive. You could, it's all in, I think, chapter 8 or something like that in the Line Method book. Or you listen to the podcast, Patrick McEwen or Wim Hof, or Patrick McEwen would be better. And just trying to maintain pretty decent consistency around sleep. So try to be in bed, like going to sleep around 11 or so. And I usually get up around like 7. I raise the back of my bed up, so my bed's actually tilted at like
Really?
I don't know, probably like a 15 or 20 degree angle or so. So it's raised up like 4 or 5 inches.
How so?
Just the back. So just got a bunch of books in the back of the bed.
Yeah.
And
what's the benefit?
Yeah. The suggestion is it's helpful with circulation of fluid in the brain. So it's helpful with the lymphatic system.
Okay.
So that can be an interesting thing for some people. Try it, see how it works for you. And then the other thing is side sleeping is suggested to be supportive with that as well. Most of the research has been done with mice, so there hasn't been much research in the support of the lymphatic system with side sleeping with humans. But that's kind of an interesting thing. And then getting up, I try to expose my eyes to light, like immediately upon getting up. So Andrew Huberman is a great resource. He helped with the vision chapter in the Line Method book. So he'd be a great resource to go deeper into all of that, but it kind of like sets your circadian rhythm, and that infrared light in the morning is just very supportive for kind of like tuning your neurochemistry and your whole, your endocrinology and everything. Go for a walk, like get outside, kind of like have a moment being with that. And then try to get some fitness in the morning of some sort, so do like some kind of like workout type thing. Try to postpone coffee for, 45 minutes, hour or so. But love coffee, put like protein and some fat and stuff in there.
So you work out early mornings. That's your preference?
Not like early mornings, but typically around like after an hour of getting up or so. So I like to have the morning to kind of have like a bit of a container for, other stuff. Whatever I feel like in that morning, but typically it's like some kind of like little meditation thing, just getting outside, chilling, listening to music, kind of just like, not having much interruptions. And then that transitions into exercise. And then the day is typically midday is when I have scheduling kind of like podcasts like this now, or anything that would be like deemed like work in quotations is typically between the hours of like 11 to like 4. And then the evening, I keep that as a container as well. So I typically don't schedule much stuff that would be in the category of like work, unless it's like something I just is fun, something I enjoy doing after 4. So the nights are open to, I go to a place I do cold plunge and sauna. I'll go through like a few rounds of that. I've been doing that for the last month. So the big thing would be like morning time as a container, midday is like work availability, and then evening time as a container. And then maintaining consistency with sleep. And yeah, those would be the main things. There's like maintaining like chapters throughout the day, I think is a thing that's important. And then also having, those anchor points, coming back to something that brings you back to like, yourself.
Yeah.
So if you're always just buzzed up throughout the day of like errands and getting stuff done, I think it's very important you can have set anchor points, like bigger anchor points where you kind of take I'm going to do a 5-minute meditation or something like that. I'm just going to breathe, but you could also start to ideally integrate that into the way that you inhabit yourself throughout the day. And that's really what the Align Method book is. It's like a user's manual to educate people on how to integrate the concepts that you learn from fitness or sport or breath work or mindfulness or whatever. How do you start to make that who you are as opposed to a thing that you do? And obviously I'm really enamored by, I don't know, like philosophy. I think it's really interesting. Like what the hell we're doing here in the first place? Like, why are you moving? Why are you working out? Or is this just like a virtue signaling game that you're doing? That's great if it is, but like, let's investigate like why that is. And then from there, is it available for us to find even deeper meaning or purpose in why we're going to the gym in the first place, or why we're sitting on the ground, or mobilizing our hips and our joints, or why we're eating what we're eating. It's like the question of why is very interesting to me.
So let's wrap it up with a few flavors of Aaron, the rapid fire questions. What type of workouts do you do right now? You've got very skilled at gymnastics, and that's very alive for me, calisthenics. But what workouts do you do currently?
I don't think I'm that skilled at gymnastics or calisthenics, but I'm like a novice of a lot of things. So I think I'm kind of like a generalist, could be a term, which I think humans in general are generalists. So we get mired
very
by
skilled
specialization.
generalist.
Yeah. I mean, if you put me in most physical scenarios, I'm like a B- or a C+ or something. There's not many things that I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good with. I have pretty decent like body awareness, and so I think that's something that I find really interesting. So just maintaining a sensation of feeling like a student and like enjoying that experience. So I'm always, I'll train with different people, and I am typically really excited to just see what people are doing. So if I'm training with whoever on it or whatever it may be, I live in Austin, so I train at the On It gym out here. I'll just take on whatever people are doing, and try something new. Cool, we're doing like maces, or we're doing calisthenics, or we're doing whatever the thing is. So that's something that I enjoy is being a novice. I'm boxing right now, so that's something that I'm really engaged with and really dig, like the dance and the art and the science, and we call it the sweet science of boxing, like the coordination of your whole body to be able to create power at an endpoint being your fist is just so cool. I mean, it's like an endless education in that. I do some kettlebell stuff. I do. It's really like a lot of different cross training and novelty. I've gone through different chapters with training. Right now, the thing that I'm the most excited about is kind of like powerlifting, calisthenics, and boxing.
Nice. So quick answers to the last ones, just to squeeze them in.
Yeah, sure.
So, food. What do you eat? How often?
I try to eat. Typically, I'll fast earlier in the day. I just did a podcast with Dr. Stacy. It's okay if we go a little bit over one. I just did a podcast with Dr. Stacy Sims, who she's like preeminent researcher, scientist of the difference between men and women, particularly around the menstrual cycle of women and how that affects their nutritional needs and fitness approaches and things of the sort. So I think there's a lot of like conflated information. I know there's a lot of conflated information of how men and women should be eating and performing, performing in the sense of just like doing training. And so I like a fast earlier on in the day. And then I'll typically won't eat anything until I train. And so if I don't train, there's a good chance that I just won't eat until dinner. And so I'll typically around 2 meals a day. First meal is pretty light-ish. It's typically protein and fat based, kind of keep myself in a little bit more of like a upright, uplifted, energetic type direction. And then I will save the carbohydrates for the evening. I'm not excessively dogmatic or robotic or like quantified self with any of this stuff. But it's kind of more like a feel thing. If I'm totally open to eating breakfast for a few days and seeing how that goes. But that generally speaking, my approach is not a lot of calories early in the morning. The calories that I do eat would be from protein or fat, light-ish lunch. Again, mostly protein, fat stuff. So like a poke bowl or something like that would be a great example. And then evening, all the sweet potatoes and yams and just, veggies and meat. Love organ meats. I think it's very important to be eating. If you're going to, I don't know, eat food in general, I think eating nose to tail is important. If you are, a vegan or vegetarian or something of the sort, I think that's fine. I know people that are successful with that. It's just way simpler to eat nose to tail. You can survive quite fine just exclusively eating nose to tail. It reacts kind of funny with some people's bodies, but generally speaking, like your body will do pretty good for a while just eating the entirety of an animal. So just as a general shotgun, I think that's a really beautiful thing, especially if you're like a pregnant woman or you're training really hard or something of the sort. I think it becomes kind of a no-brainer. And that's pretty much it. Try to stay hydrated, like duh. So simple stuff like that. Try to not eat within typically around like a 3-hour window of going to bed. But then going to bed, having a little bit of something kind of like sweet is advisable. So that people oftentimes will have low blood sugar throughout the night, and it can impede the body's ability to go into deeper states of sleep, like REM. And so that's something that I'll do sometimes. I have like a little banana before bed or something like that. That'd be like a typical day. And sometimes they eat, bullshit too. But it's typically I don't really like enjoy most things that would be classifiable as bullshit. So thankfully that's shifted over the years. That if I don't deem it to be like, oh, it's like pretty quality, like densely packed food with some level of nutrition, I usually just don't enjoy it that much. So I think that's just been like years of like telling myself stories about health or something, and now it's like, oh, I enjoy the taste of healthy shit.
Yeah. I'm very much at a similar stage. 2 meals a day, the whole shebang. But we won't go into that right now. But last question: inward practices. What's alive for you, meditation wise, breath wise, and what is alive to you that you ask yourself? What are you pondering? And they go hand in hand usually.
Well, I mean, I think just old-fashioned meditation is just really good for you. I just did a podcast with what was her name? Dr. Amishi. Dr. Amishi had a book. She did Rogan's podcast a couple weeks ago. What was her name? Amishi Jha. Anyways, she broke down in our conversation that like the minimum viable dose of meditation to create like visible, measurable neurological impact, she suggests, is 12 minutes a day. And so I've kind of hung on that as being like a baseline of like, okay, like at least 12 minutes. I think is a nice thing. I try to get that in the morning and in the evening, like upon waking ish and before going to bed. So I think just that, like I did a Vipassana meditation a few years ago, just like a 10-day sit. You just pretty much just don't do anything but meditate for 10 days. And they feed you and, they give you shelter and all that stuff. And you meditate for an hour, you go back, hang out for like, 45 minutes to an hour or whatever. Then you come back and meditate an hour. You just do that. You get up like 4:30 in the morning. And in that, Guenka is a guy that founded most of the centers. He suggests that you can pretty much just sit through most of your shit, and if you don't run from it, and like we were talking about before, like you invite it in, you be with it, you allow your body to kind of whatever the response that you would have had to go eat some food or jerk off or get on Hinge or exercise or whatever, go make more money, or like whatever your thing is. You just sit with it. On the other side of that, typically, for a lot of people, is some level of restoration or healing, or like being able to actually gain relationship with that thing. So I think that meditation is just so darn invaluable if a person's willing to like be with it. And then from there, integrating that again, like into your daily life. So you can have a little meditation moment, just like looking at somebody in the eyes and they're like you're buying coffee off them or something like that. Have a moment like, hey, like, I see you, like, hello, starting to integrate that into your day. And then I guess a question that I ask is, I don't know. I don't think I have a regular question that I regularly ask. I mean, I guess earlier I was just, asking why, like, why are we doing anything that we're doing? So that would be an interesting question that I probably ask a lot of people and myself. So I think just why, why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you doing this podcast? Why are you working out? Why are you eating the way you eat? Why are you thinking the way you think?
Yeah.
Right. I don't think I have like a specific, like, deep transcendent question other than just why. I'm like an annoying little kid with why. I just like keep on asking why. It can be terrible.
Aaron, thank you for coming on. And
Yeah.
I'm always going deep is invaluable. So thank you for taking it deeper than expected. And yeah, if you want to check you out and what you were up to, how do you find you?
Well, so we have a revised expanded version of the Aligned Method book that comes out pretty much now. Whenever you release this, it's up for pre-sale now. It's January 11th, and so people can grab that by just going back to the alignbook.com. That'll take you all the the buy button and all that stuff. You can check out the Align podcast. Maybe people listening to this might like the Bruce Lipton episode. Probably a good place to point people to start. He's the guy that wrote Biology of Belief. He's like one of my favorite conversations. And then Instagram, Align podcast.
Yep.
Those would be probably the main place. But I think if you're interested, most of what we talked about in this conversation isn't really, the book is way more like mechanics, nuts and bolts of like how to work this human machine. So if folks are interested in learning more about how to operate their bodies more effectively in this coming new year, I think the Align Method's a great resource. And so the alignbook.com be the place to go for that.
Nice. Aaron, thank you very much.
Thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate it. Good times.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in, listening to this fascinating episode with Aaron. If you want to hear some really cool stuff, I mean, his podcast is badass. I'll give it to him. And his book, I mean, yeah, read it too. Like I've come across quite a few things in the health world. He has an incredible summary. It's almost like a manual to how to live your life optimally. And he topples quite a few of the books that are out there. I won't name names, but damn, it's worth it. Listen to it, read it. The new extended version is out right now. Check out his podcast. All the links are in the show notes. Enjoy. And if you're going to connect with me, same thing. Links are in the show notes. Last ask. Hit 5 stars if you like this. Thank you for doing such. Take you 5 seconds, literally. If you want to do a change today, help this message spread more people. Just this message will spread to more people. So you can help someone else by indirectly helping us by liking this, sharing a review, hitting subscribe or like. Thank you for doing such. Sending you much love. Peace.